The Soft Unbinding Healing Trauma and Reclaiming Your Sexual Landscape about the author, Marcia Anita Hobbs. Hobbs is a multifaceted author, human rights advocate, and the creative force behind the Barbed Wire Noose brand. With a dedicated advocacy timeline spanning from 2004 ongoing, she has focused her career on championing legislative reform, individual sovereignty, and human rights, themes that are heavily reflected in her ongoing academic pursuit of a Bachelor of Laws University studies. As the author of profound works including Unbound, Healing Beyond Judgment and the Weight of Empty Hands, You Are the Ecosystem, and more, Marcia brings a gritty, witty, and deeply compassionate voice to the complex landscape of trauma recovery. Her writing empowers readers to reclaim their autonomy without shame. Her multidisciplinary qualifications include professional diplomas in management, politics and governance, arts, music production, and fashion and sustainability, reflecting her deep understanding of holistic, interconnected systems, crisis counseling, and sex therapy. Furthermore, her 20-plus years of professional experience as a dedicated aquatics and swimming teacher have deeply informed her somatic approach to healing. This extensive background in teaching physical movement and breath control uniquely equips her to understand how the body interacts with its environment, reinforcing the powerful, fluid ecosystem metaphors central to her therapeutic writing. You can connect with Marcia, learn more about her projects at www.talktomeonline.com and www.barbedwirenews.com. The Soft Unbinding, Healing Trauma and Reclaiming Your Sexual Landscape, Human Rights Matter. Copyright Marcia Anita Hobbs, B News. 2026. This work depicts actual events in the life of the author as truthfully as recollection permits. This is a work of nonfiction. No names have been changed, no characters invented, no events fabricated. The right of Marcia Anita Hobbs, B News, to be identified as the author of this work has been asserted by the author in accordance with the Copyright Act 1968, Sect 35, Ownership of Copyright in Original Works, AUS. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without the prior permission of the author and/or publishers. Any person who commits any unauthorized act in relation to this publication may be liable to criminal prosecution and civil claims for damages. The Soft Unbinding, Healing Trauma and Reclaiming Your Sexual Landscape, ISBN 9781764206617. Paperback, www.barbedwirenews.com. Barbed Wire Noose Registered Thai Limited Australia. Dedication to everyone I love and to justice for all. For everyone who believes in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, shall good always prevail over evil. Acknowledgements to the survivor, victim, child, adult, or other. I see you, I hear you, together we make a better world. Disclaimer and note to the reader: the concepts, exercises, and perspectives shared in the Soft Unbinding, Healing Trauma and Reclaiming Your Sexual Landscape are offered with the deepest respect for your personal journey. However, before you begin applying these practices, it is important to establish clear, professional boundaries regarding the scope of this book. Please read the following guidelines carefully. Educational purposes only. This book is designed to provide general information, emotional validation, and gentle, self-directed somatic practices. It is strictly for educational and self-help purposes. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, psychiatric diagnosis, or individualized psychotherapy. No therapist-client relationship. Reading this book, utilizing the exercises, or engaging with the material does not establish a therapist-client relationship between the author and the reader. The guidance provided here is generalized and cannot account for the unique, specific clinical needs of every individual. Medical and psychological care. Sexual impotence, numbness, and trauma responses are complex conditions that can have overlapping psychological and physiological causes. You are strongly encouraged to consult with a qualified healthcare provider, physician, or licensed mental health professional regarding any physical symptoms, severe trauma, or persistent emotional distress. If you are currently in therapy, it is highly recommended that you discuss the concepts in this book with your therapist to ensure they align with your clinical treatment plan. Trauma sensitivity and self-packing. This book directly addresses sexual trauma, physiological freeze responses, and the emotional aftermath of boundary violations. While the tone is gentle, interacting with these topics can cause intense emotional reactions or trigger traumatic memories. You are the ultimate authority on your own ecosystem. You are encouraged to pace yourself, skip sections that feel overwhelming, and put the book down entirely if you feel emotionally unsafe. Personal responsibility. The author and publisher are not responsible for any specific outcomes, emotional responses, or relational changes that may occur as a result of applying the ideas or exercises contained in this book. The practices are offered as gentle invitations, and engaging with them is done entirely at your own discretion and risk. Emergency support. This book is a guide for tending your inner landscape, but if you are experiencing an active mental health crisis, severe distress, or are in an unsafe environment, this book is not sufficient support. Please reach out to local emergency services, a crisis hotline, or a medical professional immediately. Healing is deeply personal work. By choosing to read this book, you acknowledge that you are the sovereign caretaker of your own ecosystem, and you agree to prioritize your safety and well-being above all else. Introduction. Welcome to your ecosystem, The Promise, setting a tone of absolute safety. No pressure, no aggressive goals like curing impotence in 10 days, and no judgment. Defining the wide scope. Expanding the definition of sex beyond performative acts or strict physical mechanics to include energy, breath, emotional intimacy, and sensual play. How to use this book. Encouraging readers to put the book down when they feel overwhelmed, treating the reading process itself as an exercise in boundaries and self-packing. Chapters Part 1. The Weight of Empty Hands, Understanding Trauma and the Pause. This section honors the grief of lost connection and explains the nervous system's response to trauma without clinical coldness. Chapter 1. The Protective Winter. Reframing Impotence. Explaining how trauma lives in the body and how the nervous system hits the brakes on sexual response to keep us safe. Chapter 2. Sitting with the Empty Hands. Acknowledging the grief of sexual disconnect. Validating the sadness, frustration, and longing that comes when the mind wants connection, but the body says no. Chapter 3. The Myth of Urgency. Dismantling the cultural pressure to get back to normal quickly. Introducing the concept of spaciousness, giving the body all the time it needs without an agenda. Part 2. Unbinding, Releasing Scripts and Shame, drawing on the theme of becoming unbound. This section helps the reader gently untangle themselves from societal expectations. Chapter 4. Taking Off the Armor. Exploring how we learn to perform sex rather than experience it. Identifying the heavy, invisible rules we carry into the bedroom and giving permission to drop them. Chapter 5. A Wide, Quiet Sky of Desire. Helping readers explore their unique sexual scope. If penetration or climax is off the table due to trauma impotence, what else is there? Exploring touch, temperature, sound, and emotional resonance. Chapter 6. Unshaming the Body. Gentle cognitive exercises to separate a person's worth from their current sexual function. Part 3. Tending the Ecosystem, Gentle Practices for Reconnection. This section provides safe, grounding exercises. Everything is an invitation, never a demand. Chapter 7. Grounding the Roots, Somatic Practices. Simple, non-sexual touch exercises to help the reader feel safe in their own skin again. E.g., tracing the collarbone, feeling the weight of a blanket, breathing into the belly. Chapter 8. Weathering the Storms Together. A Guide for Partners. How to communicate about impotence and trauma without blame or guilt. Creating a shared ecosystem of mutual care. Chapter 9. Inviting the wildlife back. Slowly reintroducing erotic energy. How to cultivate simmering rather than boiling. Finding joy in the smallest sparks of desire without demanding they turn into a fire. Conclusion. A garden always growing, a closing reminder that healing is nonlinear. There will be seasons of vibrant bloom and seasons of quiet rest, and both are natural, healthy parts of an ecosystem. Part 1. The Weight of Empty Hands, Understanding Trauma and the Pause. The soil does not apologize for freezing when the blizzard hits. It simply protects the roots. In Part I, we completely dismantle the damaging cultural narrative that treats the human body like a mechanical device that must be fixed the moment it stops producing desire. Instead, we begin viewing your physical form as a deeply intelligent ecosystem. When trauma occurs, your nervous system initiates a protective winter, freezing your sexual and sensual responses to keep you safe from perceived threats. This section is dedicated to honoring the profound, disenfranchised grief that accompanies this freeze. We sit with the agonizing weight of empty hands, the deep sorrow of wanting to connect physically while your body absolutely refuses. Rather than fighting this numbness with panic, we explore the biology of the freeze response with profound empathy, removing the clinical coldness of medical terminology. Most importantly, Part I aggressively targets the myth of urgency. We untangle the heavy, suffocating panic that tells you your healing is on a ticking clock. You will learn to drop the gavel, step out of the courtroom, and give your internal landscape the expansive, limitless time it requires to simply rest in the snow. Chapter 1. The protective winter. When you open a book like this, you are crossing a threshold. It takes a profound amount of courage to turn toward the parts of ourselves that feel numb, disconnected, or shut down. If you are reading these words, it is likely because you have noticed a quiet, heavy absence in your body. Perhaps you have tried to summon desire, only to be met with a cold wall. Perhaps the very thought of physical intimacy brings a sudden rush of panic, or conversely, an overwhelming wave of nothingness. You might be looking down at your own hands, feeling the distinct, aching grief of wanting to connect, yet finding yourself unable to reach out. This is what we will call the weight of empty hands, the heavy realization that your mind desires intimacy, but your body is refusing the invitation. Before we go any further, before we discuss healing or unbinding or reclaiming, there is a fundamental truth we must establish, one that will serve as the bedrock for our entire journey together. You are not broken. Your body is not a failing machine. Your impotence, your numbness, your loss of desire, these are not signs of your inadequacy. They are evidence of your body's extraordinary, profound intelligence. To understand this, we must completely change the way we view the human body and the nature of sexuality. The misunderstood machine versus the intelligent ecosystem. For centuries, modern culture has spoken about the human body as though it were a complex piece of machinery. We use mechanical language to describe our inner workings. We are wired a certain way. We need to recharge our batteries. We blow a gasket when we are angry, and we try to flip the switch on our sexual desire. When we view the body as a machine, our expectations of it become rigid and demanding. A machine is supposed to function consistently. If you press a button, it should turn on. If it does not turn on, the machine is broken, defective, and in need of immediate repair. This mechanical view is profoundly damaging when it comes to human sexuality, and it is catastrophic when applied to a body that has experienced trauma. When you treat your body like a broken machine, impotence feels like a mechanical failure. You push the button of desire, and nothing happens. The immediate response to a broken machine is frustration, shame, and a frantic desire to fix it by any means necessary. You might mentally berate yourself, try to force yourself into sexual situations you are not ready for, or silently carry the belief that you are permanently defective. I invite you to gently set that mechanical metaphor down. It does not serve you, and it is not the truth. You are not a machine, you are an ecosystem. Imagine a vast, sprawling forest. An ecosystem is living, breathing, and constantly responding to its environment. It has seasons of explosive growth and vibrant blooming, and it has seasons of quiet dormancy. When a forest experiences a devastating event, a raging wildfire, a severe drought, or a brutal, unseasonable freeze, the ecosystem does not break. It adapts. It responds to the threat with unparalleled biological wisdom. If a brutal winter sets in, the trees pull their sap deep down into their roots. The flowers do not bloom. The seeds remain hard and dormant beneath the frozen topsoil. To an outside observer, the forest might look dead, lifeless, and barren. But beneath the surface, the ecosystem is incredibly active. It is preserving life. It is conserving energy. It is battening down the hatches to ensure that the core of the organism survives the harsh conditions. The winter is not a failure of the forest. The winter is the forest's shield. If you have experienced trauma, your body has weathered a severe storm. Trauma, whether it was a single overwhelming event, a prolonged period of boundary violations, or the chronic stress of feeling unsafe, is a wildfire to your nervous system. In response, your inner ecosystem did exactly what nature has designed it to do. It initiated a protective winter. The anatomy of a freeze. While your body said no to gently unbind ourselves from the shame of impotence, we need to understand the quiet mechanics of how trauma lives in the nervous system. When we experience an event that threatens our safety or our autonomy, our autonomic nervous system takes over. This is the part of our biology that operates below our conscious awareness, managing our survival reflexes. You are likely familiar with the fight or flight response. When faced with danger, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and adrenaline floods your system, preparing you to either battle the threat or run away from it. But what happens when you cannot fight and you cannot flee? What happens when the threat is overwhelming, unavoidable, or inflicted by someone you depend on? When fight and flight are impossible, the nervous system deploys its final, most extreme survival strategy, the freeze response. In a freeze state, the nervous system hits the brakes completely. It floods the body with endogenous opioids to numb physical and emotional pain. It lowers the heart rate. It disconnects the conscious mind from the physical sensations of the body. In the animal kingdom, this is the reflex of a frightened creature playing dead. Hopping the predator will lose interest. In human beings, this freeze response manifests as dissociation, emotional numbness, and a profound disconnection from our physical selves. Here is the most critical piece of this biological puzzle. The freeze response directly opposes the sexual response. Sexual arousal requires a state of profound physiological and psychological safety. For the body to welcome physical intimacy, blood must flow freely to the pelvic region. The muscles must be capable of both tension and release, and the nervous system must be open to receiving sensory input. Sexual connection is, by its very nature, an act of vulnerability. When trauma occurs, the nervous system fundamentally rewires its definition of safety. It remembers that being vulnerable, being open, and being physically present led to pain, violation, or overwhelming fear. Therefore, the nervous system concludes that the pathways of sexual arousal are dangerous. It shuts them down. It pulls the energy away from the pelvis and the reproductive organs, pulling the sap down into the roots for protection. Impotence, lack of arousal, or the inability to experience orgasm are not signs that you have lost your sexuality. They are signs that your freeze response is still actively trying to save your life. Your body is holding up a shield. It is saying, I remember what happened when we were open. I am not going to let that happen again. I am keeping us closed. I am keeping us safe. The weight of empty hands, honoring the grief, understanding the biology of your protective winter is the first step in unbinding yourself from shame. But understanding the science does not immediately erase the sorrow. There is a deep, quiet grief in wanting to hold someone or wanting to be held and finding that your body recoils. There is a sorrow in lying next to a partner you love, feeling the warmth of their skin, and realizing that your own physical landscape is completely devoid of desire. You reach out for the connection you used to know or the connection you wish you had, and you pull back the weight of empty hands. In our culture, we are rarely given permission to grieve the loss of our sexual vitality. We are told to buy a pill, read a magazine article with 10 quick tips to spice things up, or fake it until we make it. We are told to rush past the empty hands and force them to hold something, anything, just to prove we are normal. But healing a trauma-impacted ecosystem requires a radically different approach. It requires us to stop fighting the winter. You cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling its petals open. If you pry a blossom open before it is ready, you will only tear the delicate tissue. The flower will only open when the environment is warm enough, safe enough, and resourced enough to support its blooming. When we try to force sexual function, when we ignore our body's clear no because we feel guilty or because we are trying to perform normalcy, we are violently pulling at our own petals. We are confirming to our nervous system that the world is demanding and unsafe, and that our boundaries do not matter. This only deepens the freeze. It reinforces the winter. The soft unbinding begins when we finally allow ourselves to sit with the weight of our empty hands. It begins when we look at our numbness not with anger, but with profound compassion. Take a moment to imagine addressing your own body. Imagine speaking to the part of you that refuses to respond, the part that remains stubbornly, frustratingly numb. Instead of demanding that it change, what if you simply offered it acknowledgement? What if you said, I see you. I see how hard you are working to protect me. I know you are keeping me numb because you are terrified of what will happen if we feel again. Thank you for being my shield. You don't have to change today. I am not going to force you. This is the gentle turning point. Paradoxically, the moment we stop demanding that our bodies perform sexually is often the very moment the nervous system begins to realize the threat has passed. Acceptance is the sunlight that slowly begins to warm the frozen soil. Dropping the urgency, cultivating spaciousness as we embark on this journey together, we must actively dismantle the timeline. Trauma creates a sense of profound urgency, the feeling that we must escape, fix, or resolve a situation immediately. When we bring that trauma-induced urgency into our healing process, we inadvertently create more stress for the ecosystem. You may be holding a conscious or unconscious timeline in your mind. I need to be able to have normal sex by next month. Or, if I don't fix this impotence soon, my relationship will fail. These thoughts are entirely understandable, but they are heavy chains. They bind you to a performance metric that your nervous system simply cannot meet right now. To heal, we must introduce the concept of spaciousness. Spaciousness means giving your body an infinite runway. It means removing all expectations of a sexual outcome. We are not going to spend this book trying to trick your body into having sex. We are going to spend this book tending to the soil, untangling the roots, and slowly, gently showing your nervous system that it is safe to inhabit your physical form again. If your ecosystem needs to rest in a protective winter for a while longer, we will let it rest. We will sit by the quiet, snow-covered landscape and learn to appreciate the stillness. We will unbind you from the heavy scripts that say your worth is tied to your sexual function. We will learn that the ecosystem is beautiful and worthy of care, regardless of what season it is in. A gentle grounding practice. Noticing the edges at the end of each chapter, I will offer an invitation. These are not tasks to be completed, nor are they tests to pass. They are simply gentle offerings to help you begin reconnecting with your ecosystem in a way that is entirely divorced from sexual expectation. If at any point an exercise feels overwhelming, you have full permission to stop. Putting the book down and walking away when you feel triggered is not a failure. It is a massive victory. It means you are listening to your body's boundaries. For our first practice, we are not going to focus on the center of your body. When trauma affects our sexuality, the pelvic region, the chest, and the torso often hold the heaviest concentrations of protective numbness or traumatic memory. Asking you to focus there right now would be like asking you to walk directly into the center of a frozen lake. Instead, we are going to start at the safest, furthest edges of your ecosystem. The practice. Tending the periphery, find a quiet space. Sit or lie down in a place where you will not be interrupted and where you feel physically secure. You can keep your eyes open or closed, whichever feels safer for you. Notice your environment. Take a moment to look around the room. Name 3 objects you can see. Notice their colors. This signals to your brain that you are in the present moment, not in the past where the trauma occurred. Bring your attention to your hands. Let them rest in your lap or by your sides. Notice the weight of them. These are the hands we spoke of earlier. Instead of focusing on their emptiness, simply focus on their physical presence. Explore texture. Gently rub your thumb across the fingertips of the same hand. Notice the ridges of your fingerprints. What does it feel like? Is the skin warm or cool, dry or soft? Do not try to force any profound feelings. You are simply an observer gathering data. Move to the feet. Shift your awareness to the furthest edge of your body, your feet. Wiggle your toes inside your socks or against the floor. Feel the solid ground beneath your heels. The ground is holding you up. You do not have to do any work to be supported by the floor right now. The breath of permission. Take a normal, unforced breath. As you exhale, silently say to yourself, I have permission to be exactly as I am right now. I do not have to fix anything today. Spend as little or as much time with this practice as you like. You are simply introducing yourself back into the outer edges of your forest, leaving gentle footprints in the snow, and letting your body know that you are returning as a caretaker, not a demanding master. The winter may be cold, and the hands may feel heavy, but you are no longer abandoning the ecosystem. You are here, and slowly, gently, we will learn to wait for the spring together. Chapter 2. Sitting with the empty hands, there is a specific, quiet agony in reaching for something that used to be there, only to find the space completely bare. If you have ever missed a step in the dark, you know the sudden, plunging sensation in your stomach when your foot meets thin air instead of solid ground. Your brain anticipated a connection that your body did not find. When we talk about the aftermath of trauma and the onset of sexual impotence or numbness, we are talking about a very similar, albeit deeply prolonged, sensation. You reach out, emotionally, physically, or psychologically, anticipating the spark of desire, the warmth of connection, or the familiar rhythm of physical intimacy, but your hands close around nothing. This is the weight of empty hands. It is the profound dissonance between the mind's yearning and the body's absolute refusal. In our first chapter, we explored the biological brilliance of your body's protective winter. We established that your numbness is not a malfunction, but a desperately intelligent shield forged by your nervous system to keep you safe. Understanding this conceptually is a necessary foundation, but intellectual understanding rarely soothes an aching heart. It is one thing to know why the forest is frozen. It is an entirely different endeavor to stand shivering in the middle of it, mourning the summer that has been lost. Before we can begin the gentle work of unbinding, before we can even think about inviting the wildlife back into your ecosystem, we must pause. We must do the brave, deeply countercultural work of acknowledging what has been lost. We must talk about the grief. The disenfranchised grief of sexual loss grief is a landscape we are usually only taught to navigate in the context of death. When we lose a loved one, society offers us a script. There are funerals, casseroles, sympathy cards, and a collective understanding that mourning is necessary. We are given time off from work. We are afforded a grace period where tears are expected and our sorrow is validated. But what happens when the loss is internal? What happens when the loss is your own sexual vitality, your ability to connect with a partner, or your sense of safety within your own skin? Psychologists refer to this as disenfranchised grief. This is a profound sense of loss that is not openly acknowledged, socially validated, or publicly mourned. There are no sympathy cards for impotence. There are no support groups that meet in the basements of community centers with banners reading. For those who have lost their desire, because sexuality is so heavily stigmatized, shrouded in societal shame, unrealistic expectations, and a demand for constant performance, the loss of it becomes a deeply private, deeply isolating tragedy. When your grief is disenfranchised, you are forced to carry it alone. You might sit across from friends at a dinner party who are casually joking about their intimate lives, while a heavy, silent stone sits in your chest. You smile and nod, feeling entirely alien, carrying a secret sorrow that you are convinced no one else could possibly understand. This isolation compounds the trauma. Not only did you experience something that forced your nervous system to shut down, but you are now navigating the painful aftermath in absolute silence. You are carrying the weight of empty hands, but you are hiding those hands behind your back so that no one else can see them. I want to invite you to bring your hands forward right now. In the quiet, private space of this book, I want to validate your loss. It is a real loss. It is a profound loss. Losing access to your sexual landscape, even temporarily, is a deeply mournful experience, and your sadness is entirely justified. You are allowed to grieve the pleasure you cannot currently access. You are allowed to mourn the spontaneous, carefree intimacy that trauma has stolen from you. The agony of the split, when mind and body disagree to sit with the empty hands, is to confront the agonizing split that trauma creates between the mind and the body. Often, survivors of trauma experience a maddening paradox. Your mind might look at your partner, someone you deeply love, trust, and cherish, and think, I want to be close to you. I want to make love. I want to feel connected. The emotional desire is present. The cognitive willingness is there. Yet the moment physical touch is initiated, or the moment the mind tries to translate that thought into bodily action, a heavy steel door slams shut. The body freezes. The chest tightens, the breath becomes shallow, the skin might even feel cold or numb, and the pelvic region completely withdraws its energy. This split is the breeding ground for immense frustration. It feels like a betrayal. You might think, why won't my body just cooperate? I know I am safe with this person. I know I want this. When we view the body as a machine, this split makes us feel defective. But when we remember our guiding metaphor, the ecosystem, this split makes perfect sense. Your mind is like the canopy of the forest, reaching up into the sunlight, able to see the vast horizon and recognize that the storm has passed. The mind can see the safe partner. The mind can read the safe environment. But your body, your nervous system, is the deep root system buried in the dark soil. The roots do not have eyes. They cannot see that the storm is over. They only remember the flood. They only remember the fire. Until the soil itself feels consistently, deeply warm and unthreatened, the roots will not send the sap back up to the canopy, no matter how much the canopy asks for it. Sitting with the empty hands means honoring this split without punishing yourself for it. It means recognizing that your mind and your body are temporarily operating on different timelines. Mind has recognized safety, but the body's memory of danger is older, deeper, and slower to change. You do not have to force the roots to listen to the canopy. Instead, we must learn to be the compassionate observer of both. The companions of grief, anger, guilt, and shame. As you sit in this quiet winter, you will likely find that grief rarely travels alone. It brings loud, heavy companions. Understanding these companions is crucial, so that when they arrive, you do not mistake them for the truth. When the guardian of anger, it is incredibly common to feel a sudden, intense flash of anger when confronted with your impotence or numbness. You might feel angry at the person who caused your trauma. You might feel angry at the universe for allowing it to happen. Often, devastatingly, you might feel angry at your own body for failing you. In the gentlest way possible, I want to reframe this anger for you. Anger, in a traumatized ecosystem, is often a sign of returning life. When a body is completely frozen, it feels nothing. Anger requires energy. Anger is the fire returning to the soil. It is your boundary screaming, "This was unfair. I deserved better." If you feel angry that your hands are empty, it means you still value yourself enough to know you deserve connection. Your anger is a fiercely protective guardian. However, when we direct that anger inward, when we hate our bodies for their numbness, we accidentally turn the guardian into an attacker. If you feel anger rising, let it be directed at the circumstance of the trauma, not the biology of your survival. The ghost of guilt. Guilt often whispers that your empty hands are a burden to others. If you have a partner, guilt is the voice that says, "You are failing them. They are going to leave you. You are withholding something they need." Guilt thrives in the darkness of the trying phase. We exhaust ourselves trying to perform, trying to force the ecosystem to bloom to assuage our guilt. But forcing intimacy out of guilt is like watering a plant with acid. It may look like you are tending to the garden, but you are secretly corroding the roots. Your worth in a relationship is not, and has never been, measured by the mechanical functioning of your sexual organs. If your partner truly loves you, they love the whole ecosystem, the winters and the summers alike. The heavy blanket of shame. Guilt says, "I have done something wrong." Shame says, "I am something wrong." Shame is the heaviest weight of all. It tells you that your impotence is a fundamental flaw in your character. It tells you that you are fundamentally unlovable, broken beyond repair, and permanently damaged goods. Shame cannot survive empathy. The entire purpose of this book is to shine the warm, unwavering light of empathy onto your shame until it melts away. You are not your trauma. You are not your impotence. You are the vast, beautiful sky holding the weather, and right now, the weather is just cold. Dropping the burden of trying. One of the most radical things you can do for your healing is to stop trying. For many trauma survivors, intimacy has become a battlefield. The bedroom has become a testing ground where you repeatedly check to see if you are fixed yet. You enter the space holding your breath, analyzing every physical sensation, desperately hopping for a spark, and inevitably crashing into disappointment when the numbness persists. Every time you do this, you are picking up a massive boulder of expectation and trying to carry it with your empty hands. No wonder you are exhausted. What would happen if you simply set the boulder down? What if, for the next week or the next month, you took sexual performance completely off the table? What if you declared a ceasefire with your own body? Sitting with the empty hands means looking at your palms and saying, "I do not have to hold anything right now." You do not have to hold a performance. You do not have to hold your partner's expectations. You do not have to hold a timeline for your recovery. Imagine the relief of an ecosystem that is finally allowed to just be in winter. The trees do not apologize for shedding their leaves. The soil does not feel guilty for freezing over. It simply rests, trusting that the resting is the work. When you remove the pressure to perform, you remove the primary source of panic for your nervous system. You take the threat out of the environment. You stop proving to your body that intimacy is stressful, and you start proving that you are a safe, patient caretaker who will not force the boundaries. Redefining what the hands can hold. When we accept that our hands cannot currently hold sexual desire, a miraculous thing happens. We realize they are free to hold other things. The soft unbinding is not just about letting go of what we cannot do. It is about gently noticing what we can do. If your sexual scope has narrowed to the point of a pinhead due to trauma, we are not going to force that pinhead open. We are going to look at the vast, wide sky everywhere else. If your hands cannot hold sexual connection right now, what else can they hold? Perhaps today, your hands can hold a warm mug of tea, feeling the heat seep through the ceramic into your skin, providing a safe, gentle sensory experience. Perhaps your hands can hold a heavy blanket, pulling it tightly around your shoulders to give your nervous system the deep pressure it craves to feel secure. Perhaps your hands can hold a journal, pouring the grief onto a page so that your chest does not have to carry it all alone. Perhaps your hands can hold the hands of your partner, sitting on the couch watching a movie, explicitly agreeing that this touch will not escalate, that it is simply a tether to another human being. You are not broken because your scope of touch has temporarily shifted. You are simply reorganizing your resources. Grief is a heavy tenant, but it does not live in your body forever. When we stop trying to evict our grief and instead pull up a chair and sit beside it, its sharp edges begin to soften. It transforms from a terrifying monster into a tired, wounded creature that just needs to be seen. A gentle grounding practice. Mapping the weight. In our last chapter, we practiced noticing the edges of your physical ecosystem. Today, we are going to practice acknowledging the emotional weather within that ecosystem, using a highly structured, contained somatic exercise. This practice is designed to help you physically map the feeling of grief or numbness, allowing you to observe it without being consumed by it. Practice, the compassionate observer. Establish your base. Find a comfortable seated position. Make sure your back is supported. Place your feet flat on the floor. Take a moment to feel the solid reality of the ground beneath you. You are here in the present moment. Turn your palms up. Rest your hands on your lap, thighs, or the arms of your chair with your palms facing upward toward the ceiling. This is an open, receptive posture. It physically embodies the concept of empty hands. Locate the feeling. Gently, without forcing it, bring to mind the feeling of your sexual disconnect. Notice where that feeling physically lives in your body. Does it feel like a tightness in your chest, a hollow sensation in your stomach, a heavy numbness in your pelvis, a buzzing in your head? Give it a shape. Once you have located the sensation, use your imagination to give it a shape and a weight. If this feeling were an object sitting in your open hands, what would it look like? Is it a heavy, cold iron ball? Is it a jagged rock? Is it a piece of brittle, dry wood? Is it a pool of freezing water? Hold the weight. Look down at your empty, upturned palms. Imagine holding that heavy object. Do not try to drop it. Do not try to throw it away. Just feel the imaginary weight of it. The statement of acknowledgement. Speak aloud or firmly in your mind to the object in your hands. I feel how heavy you are. I see that you are made of grief and fear and protection. I am strong enough to hold you for a moment. You are a part of my story, but you are not the whole story. Closing the practice. After a few moments, imagine gently setting the object down on the floor beside you. Turn your hands over, palms facing down, resting them on your legs. Take a slow, grounding breath. Look around the room and name 3 colors you see to bring your mind fully back to the present. You do not have to carry the weight all the time. But taking a moment to consciously hold it, look at it, and validate its existence is the gentlest, most profound way to begin untangling its hold on your life. You are an ecosystem in winter, and the snow is heavy. But the roots are strong, and you are learning how to tend to the soil. Rest here as long as you need. Chapter 3. The myth of urgency. We live in a culture that is utterly terrified of stillness. We are conditioned from a remarkably young age to measure our worth by our velocity. We celebrate the quick fix, the overnight success, the life hack, and the expedited timeline. If something is broken, the mandate is to repair it immediately so that production can resume. If a problem arises, the expectation is that we will immediately implement a 5-step plan to eradicate it. We are a society governed by the ticking clock, heavily invested in the illusion that speed equals efficiency, and that resting is synonymous with failing. This cultural obsession with speed is toxic enough in our professional and daily lives, but when it infiltrates the deeply sacred, highly sensitive realm of trauma recovery and sexual healing, it becomes profoundly destructive. When you're carrying the weight of empty hands, when your body has initiated a protective winter and shut down your sexual responses, the absolute worst environment you can subject yourself to is one of urgency. Yet, urgency is almost always our default reaction. We panic. We look at our numbness, we look at our partner, we look at the calendar, and a frantic alarm begins to sound in our minds. I need to fix this right now. I am running out of time. If I don't get back to normal quickly, I am going to lose everything. I want you to take a slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, I want you to begin unbinding yourself from that alarm. The clock you hear ticking is a complete fabrication. It is the myth of urgency. And to achieve healing beyond judgment, we must first dismantle the timeline that is keeping you trapped in a state of perpetual failure. The anatomy of the rush. While we panic to understand why we rush our healing, we have to look at how trauma alters our perception of time. When you experience a traumatic event, your nervous system is thrust into a state of absolute, life-or-death immediacy. In a moment of danger, there is no past, and there is no future. There is only the split-second necessity of surviving the now. The threat is imminent. The need to escape or defend yourself is urgent. Your body floods with adrenaline and cortisol, chemical messengers that scream, "Hurry!" Long after the actual threat has passed, the traumatized nervous system often remains stuck in this gear. It continues to perceive the world through the lens of time scarcity. This is why trauma survivors often struggle with anxiety, feeling a constant, vibrating need to be doing something, fixing something, or anticipating the next disaster. The body is still bracing for an impact that has already happened. Now, bring this traumatized, urgency-driven nervous system into the bedroom. You notice that your body is not responding. Your hands are empty. Instantly, the old alarm bells ring. The lack of sexual response is perceived not as a gentle request for a pause, but as an emergency. The brain categorizes your impotence as a critical threat to your relationship, your identity, or your normalcy, and it applies the only survival strategy it knows. Hurry up and fix it. We attempt to force the terrain. We grit our teeth and try to push through the numbness. We white-knuckle our way through physical intimacy, gripping the reins of our own bodies so tightly that our knuckles turn white, desperately trying to steer ourselves back onto the path of normalcy. But forcing a traumatized body to be intimate is like holding the throttle wide open while trying to navigate over broken, unpredictable ground. You cannot muscle your way over shattered terrain. If you force the machine to go faster than the environment allows, you will inevitably crash, causing far more damage than if you had simply slowed down or stopped entirely. Your inner ecosystem does not respond to force. It responds to safety. And there is absolutely nothing safe about being rushed. Dropping the gavel, healing beyond judgment urgency is intimately tied to judgment. We only rush when we have judged our current state as unacceptable. When you look at your sexual numbness and declare, "This is bad, this is wrong, I must be rid of it by next month," you have appointed yourself as the judge, jury, and executioner of your own ecosystem. You have slammed the gavel down and declared your body guilty of malfunctioning. But true healing requires us to step down from the bench. It requires us to lay down the gavel and step out of the courtroom entirely. You cannot heal a body that you are simultaneously prosecuting. To heal beyond judgment means looking at your empty hands and refusing to assign a moral value to them. Impotence is not a crime. Numbness is not a moral failing. The protective winter is not a breach of contract with your partner or with society. It is simply the weather. You would not stand in a field in January, screaming at the frozen soil, judging it for not producing a harvest. You would understand that the soil is doing exactly what it needs to do to survive the season. We must extend this exact same grace to our own flesh and blood. You must become the fiercest defender of your right to be exactly where you are. In a world that constantly demands you perform, it takes an incredible amount of grit and resilience to stand your ground and say, "No, I will not rush this." It takes a profound, witty defiance to look at the societal magazines and the cultural pressures promising a quick fix and to simply laugh at their absurdity. You know better. You know that deep, foundational healing cannot be scheduled, quantified, or legislated by an outside source. Writing your own legislation. The act of self-advocacy if we are going to discard the cultural laws of urgency. We must write new laws for ourselves. For too long, you have likely allowed outside forces, the media, past partners, or the lingering voices of those who caused your trauma, to dictate the rules of your body. Part of the soft unbinding process is stepping into your own inherent power and becoming the primary advocate for your physical autonomy. Think of it as drafting a new constitution for your inner ecosystem. You get to write the legislation that governs your body. Here are a few foundational rights you might consider ratifying in your new constitution. 1. The right to decline. You have the absolute, irrevocable right to say no to any physical touch at any time for any reason, even if you previously said yes. You do not need to present a compelling argument or a doctor's note to validate your no. Your lack of desire is justification enough. 2. The right to an undefined timeline. You have the right to heal without a deadline. You are not on a probation period. There is no expiration date on your partner's patience, and if there is, that is a reflection of their limitations, not your worth. You are allowed to take 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years to recalibrate your nervous system. 3. The right to redefine intimacy. You have the right to rewrite the definition of sex. If the traditional definitions feel threatening, painful, or impossible, you have the authority to throw them out. You are allowed to declare that, for now, intimacy means sitting back to back and reading. You are allowed to declare that intimacy means holding hands in the car. You get to set the parameters of what connection looks like in your ecosystem. When you begin to internalize these rights, a remarkable shift occurs. The heavy, suffocating pressure of urgency begins to lift. You are no longer a victim failing to meet a deadline. You are a sovereign individual exercising your right to rest. Cultivating spaciousness. The antidote to the rush if urgency is the poison, spaciousness is the antidote. Spaciousness is the deliberate, conscious expansion of time and expectation. It is the opposite of the claustrophobic, panicked energy of the rush. When we cultivate spaciousness, we are giving our nervous system a massive, open field in which to breathe. We are saying to the body, take all the room you need. There is nowhere we have to be and nothing we have to achieve. How do we actually cultivate this in our daily lives, particularly in our intimate relationships? 1. Removing the goalpost. In most sexual encounters, there is an implicit goalpost, orgasm, penetration, or a specific physical conclusion. When you are healing from trauma, that goalpost is a massive source of anxiety. Cultivating spaciousness means entirely removing the goalpost. It means engaging in physical touch, if and only if you are ready, with the explicit, spoken agreement that it will not lead anywhere. Imagine lying in bed with your partner, knowing with absolute certainty that the touching will stop before it ever escalates to the point of panic. Imagine the profound relief your nervous system would feel knowing that the boundary is secure, that there is no hidden agenda, and that the only goal is to just be there. This is spaciousness. It allows the body to relax, knowing it is not going to be asked to perform a task it is not prepared for. 2. Embracing the pause. Urgency demands continuous forward motion. Spaciousness welcomes the pause. If you are exploring gentle touch and you suddenly feel a wave of numbness or a spike of anxiety, the old instinct of urgency would tell you to push through it, to ignore it, to keep going so you don't ruin the mood. Spaciousness tells you to stop. It gives you permission to pause, pull back, take a breath, and recalibrate. It teaches you that a pause is not a failure. It is a vital, healthy function of your body's communication system. It is your ecosystem shifting gears. Respect the pause. Honor the pause. 3. Communicating the winter. Cultivating spaciousness requires gritty, honest communication. It requires the courage to look at your partner and say, "My hands are empty right now. I am in a protective winter. I love you, but I need to take all sexual expectations off the table for the foreseeable future so that I can learn to feel safe in my body again." This is a terrifying conversation to have. It feels incredibly vulnerable, but it is the ultimate act of unbinding. By speaking the truth, you remove the heavy cloak of secrecy and guilt. You stop trying to manage your partner's expectations through performance, and you invite them to become a co-caretaker of the ecosystem, helping you maintain the wide, safe boundaries you need to rest. The courage to disappoint. We must address a very difficult truth. Cultivating spaciousness and dropping the urgency will likely mean disappointing someone. It might mean disappointing a partner who misses the physical connection you used to share. It might mean disappointing your own ego, which desperately wants to feel normal again. As a society, We are heavily conditioned to prioritize the comfort of others over our own physical boundaries, particularly when it comes to women's bodies. We are taught to manage other people's emotions by sacrificing our own comfort. Letting go of urgency means finding the courage to let people be disappointed. Your partner is allowed to feel sad or frustrated that their sexual needs are temporarily unmet. Their feelings are valid, and this is a massive, crucial, but their disappointment is not a command for you to violate your own boundaries. You can hold space for their sadness without offering your body as the solution. You can say, I know this is hard for you. It is hard for me too, but I cannot rush my healing to soothe your disappointment. It takes an incredibly strong spine to hold that boundary with grace and softness. It requires you to act as a grounded, unwavering advocate for your own soul. You must remember that true intimacy cannot be built on a foundation of self-abandonment. If you force yourself to perform sexually to keep someone else happy, you are actively re-traumatizing your nervous system. You are teaching your body that its no does not matter. Time as an ocean, not a clock. I want you to change the way you visualize time in relation to your healing. Throw away the image of the ticking stopwatch. Throw away the calendar with its rigid squares and deadlines. Instead, I want you to imagine time as an ocean. An ocean is vast, deep, and entirely unbothered by the human desire for speed. It moves to the rhythm of the moon and the tides. It has storms that churn the surface, and it has deep, silent currents that move slowly along the floor. You cannot rush the ocean. You cannot stand on the shore and demand that the tide come in faster. You can only stand at the edge, respect its power, and learn to move with its natural rhythm. Your healing process is an ocean. The protective winter you are in is a slow, deep current. It is doing vital, unseen work beneath the surface. You do not need to swim frantically against it. You do not need to reach the other shore by tomorrow. You are allowed to just float. You are allowed to let the water hold the weight of your empty hands. When you truly internalize this, when the myth of urgency shatters and you realize that you have all the time in the world, the strangest, most beautiful paradox occurs. In the absence of pressure, the nervous system finally breathes a sigh of relief. The threat level lowers. The soil begins to thaw. By giving up the desperate need to heal quickly, you actually create the exact environment required for genuine healing to begin. A gentle grounding practice. Dropping the reins when we are caught in the grip of urgency, our physical bodies reflect that tension. We clench our jaws, we draw our shoulders up toward our ears, and we subconsciously brace our muscles as if we are holding tightly to the reins of a runaway horse, terrified that if we let go, we will be thrown. This practice is designed to help you physically signal to your nervous system that the race is over. There is nowhere to run, and there is nothing to force. We are going to practice dropping the reins. The practice, the expansive breath. Find your anchor. Sit comfortably in a chair where your back is fully supported. Place both feet flat on the floor, about shoulder-width apart. Feel the density of your feet against the ground. Notice the grip. Bring your awareness to your hands and your jaw. Notice if you are holding any tension there. Are your teeth clenched? Are your fingers curled or stiff? Simply observe the tension without judging it. It is just your body trying to hold on. The inhalation. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. As you inhale, imagine that you are gathering up all the timelines, all the expectations, and all the pressure you have been carrying regarding your sexual healing. Gather them up into your chest, the exhalation of release. As you exhale through your mouth, make an audible sigh. As you let the breath out, physically open your hands, spreading your fingers wide and let them fall limply into your lap. Imagine physically dropping the reins. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw slacken, the spacious pause. After you exhale, do not rush to take the next breath. Allow your body to rest in the empty space at the bottom of the breath for just 1 or 2 seconds. This tiny pause is a physical manifestation of spaciousness. The affirmation. As you sit with your hands open and relaxed, silently say to yourself, I drop the timeline. I drop the gavel. I have nowhere to be but exactly where I am. I give myself all the time in the world. Repeat. Repeat this cycle 3 or 4 times, or until you feel the frantic vibration of urgency begin to settle in your chest. You do not have to drive the machine today. You do not have to force the terrain. You are an ecosystem, and today you are simply allowed to exist in the quiet, spacious air of your own winter. Part 2. Unbinding, releasing scripts and shame. You cannot feel the sun on your skin if you are wearing a suit of iron armor. Part II shifts our focus from the biological roots of your protective winter to the heavy, manufactured expectations we carry into our intimate lives. In this section, we do the gritty, courageous work of unbinding. We identify the exhausting, performative scripts society hands us regarding what sex must look like, the demand for spontaneous desire, the requirement of a flawless performance, and the tyranny of the climax as the only acceptable goal. We practice taking off this heavy iron armor. By explicitly giving yourself permission to stop performing and stop faking, you create a vital space between societal demands and your own authentic skin. Furthermore, this section takes a direct, uncompromising stance against body shame. We explore how to separate your inherent worth from your current sexual function, pivoting away from toxic positivity and embracing the profound relief of body neutrality. As we dismantle the narrow, panic-inducing stairwell of sexual escalation, we step out into the wide, quiet sky of desire, learning that your capacity for connection is infinitely broader than traditional intercourse. Chapter 4. Taking off the armor. Imagine, for a moment, that you are asked to walk through a dense, beautiful forest. You are told that the purpose of this walk is to feel the soft moss beneath your feet, to experience the warmth of the sun filtering through the canopy, and to let the gentle breeze brush against your skin. But before you step onto the path, you are handed a heavy, restrictive suit of iron armor. You are told you must wear it to be acceptable, to look the part of a proper traveler, and to ensure you do the walk correctly. You step into the forest. The armor is incredibly heavy. The joints are stiff, forcing you to walk with a rigid, unnatural gait. When the sunlight hits the metal, it simply reflects away. You cannot feel its warmth. When the wind blows, it cannot reach your skin. You are surrounded by a thriving, breathing ecosystem, but you are completely sealed off from it. You are exhausting yourself just trying to carry the weight of the suit, constantly adjusting the heavy breastplate and the suffocating helmet. By the time you reach the end of the path, you are drained, aching, and entirely numb to the environment you just walked through. When you tell people that you did not enjoy the forest, that you felt nothing but exhaustion and numbness, they look at you with confusion. But it's a beautiful forest, they say. Everyone loves the forest. Is there something wrong with you? There is nothing wrong with you. You were simply wearing armor. As we step into part II of our journey, we are shifting our focus from the biological roots of your winter to the heavy, manufactured layers we wear above the soil. To achieve a soft unbinding, we must look closely at how we have been taught to approach intimacy. For most of us, and especially for those who carry the physical memories of trauma, sex is not something we actually experience. It is something we perform. We do not enter the bedroom as our bare, authentic selves. We enter dressed in heavy, invisible armor constructed from societal scripts, unspoken rules, and an exhausting demand for perfection. It is time to start taking the armor off. The scripted performance from the moment we are old enough to consume media, listen to our peers, or absorb the quiet undertones of our culture, we are handed a script about what intimacy is supposed to look like. We are given a highly choreographed, neatly tailored set of instructions. This cultural script dictates that sex must be spontaneous but flawless. It must be effortlessly passionate. It dictates a specific sequence of events, a specific timeline, and a specific, mandatory conclusion. It teaches us that our bodies are not ecosystems to be explored, but instruments to be played for an audience, even if that audience is just one other person. When we internalize this script, we stop being participants in our own lives and become actors on a stage. We memorize our lines. We learn what sounds to make, what angles look best, and what physical responses are expected of us. We tailor our bodies and our reactions to fit a rigid, pre-designed costume of normalcy. If your body is already in a protective winter, this demand for performance is agonizing. When your nervous system has shut down the genuine pathways of desire, the only way you can participate in the cultural script is to fake it. You learn to detach your mind from your numb, unresponsive body, floating up to the ceiling like a director managing a play. You move your limbs as instructed, you manufacture the expected enthusiasm, and you grit your teeth until the curtain falls. This performance requires an extraordinary amount of energy. It is an act of sheer, gritty endurance. But it is entirely devoid of connection. You cannot deeply connect with a partner when you are simultaneously acting as the director, the lead actor, and the anxious critic of your own body. The armor of dissociation, While we perform, we must approach this performance not with harsh judgment, but with profound, sweeping empathy. We do not put on this heavy armor because we are deceitful. We put it on for two very distinct protective reasons. First, we perform because we are terrified of disappointing our partners. The guilt we explored in Chapter 2 drives us to dress up in the armor of the perfect partner. We believe that if we drop the act, if we admit that our hands are empty and our bodies are frozen, we will be abandoned. So, we sacrifice our own physical boundaries on the altar of someone else's comfort. We perform to keep the peace. Second, and perhaps most importantly for survivors of trauma, performance is a brilliant form of dissociation. When you are acting, you do not have to feel. If you treat intimacy like a heavily scripted scene, you are successfully keeping your true, vulnerable self safely hidden behind the iron breastplate. The armor keeps the trauma at bay. If you are entirely focused on whether you are doing things right, if your mind is busy critiquing your performance, there is no mental bandwidth left to actually feel the physical sensations of your body. For a traumatized nervous system, feeling physical sensations is terrifying. To feel is to risk encountering the stored memory of the trauma. To feel is to be present in the very body where the violation occurred. Therefore, the body concludes, it is safer to act than to feel. It is safer to wear the armor than to be bare. Your performance saved you. It allowed you to navigate a world that demanded you be okay when you were deeply wounded. Your ability to put on that armor and push through is a testament to your resilience. But the armor that protected you in the battle is now crushing you in times of peace. The iron is rusting, the joints are locking up, and the ecosystem beneath it is starving for sunlight. To unbind yourself, you have to acknowledge the armor's past utility, thank it for its service, and find the courage to unbuckle the straps. The inventory of invisible rules. If we are going to repeal the heavy, archaic legislation that governs our bodies, we must first read the laws aloud. We cannot dismantle what we have not identified. Let us take an inventory of the invisible rules you likely carry into the bedroom, so we can finally give you explicit permission to break them. The rule of the seamless transition. The rule. Intimacy must flow effortlessly from regular life to profound passion. You must be able to switch from paying the bills and managing daily stress to being a completely uninhibited, highly aroused creature at the drop of a hat. There should be no awkwardness, no hesitation, and no need for a gradual transition. The reality: this is a cinematic fantasy. For a traumatized nervous system, abrupt transitions are inherently triggering. A nervous system in a freeze state requires a long, slow, clearly marked runway to even consider changing gears. The permission to drop it. You have permission to be clunky. You have permission to need an hour of quiet, non-sexual grounding before you even consider holding hands. You have permission to say, my mind is spinning, and I need a slow transition to arrive in my body. The rule of the goalpost. The rule. All physical intimacy must lead to an orgasm. If it does not end in a climax, the encounter was a failure, a waste of time, or a sign that something is terribly wrong with you or your relationship. The reality: this rule turns intimacy into a pass-fail exam. When you are healing from sexual trauma, the pressure of the climax is often the single greatest obstacle to feeling safe. It introduces a massive, looming demand into an ecosystem that just needs to rest. The permission to drop it. You have permission to wander without a destination. You are allowed to engage in touch, kissing, or holding that has absolutely no ending planned. You have the right to declare that the goal is simply to be present for 5 minutes and then to go to sleep. The rule of visual perfection. The rule. You must look desirable at all times during intimacy. Your stomach must be held in, your face must reflect ecstasy, and you must arrange your limbs in a way that is aesthetically pleasing to your partner. The reality: this is the heaviest piece of armor. When you are monitoring your own aesthetics, you are viewing yourself from the outside in. You are entirely disconnected from the internal, somatic experience of your ecosystem. You are a mannequin, not a living creature. The permission to drop it. You have permission to be entirely unconcerned with how you look. You have permission to close your eyes, to move awkwardly, to make strange faces, or to completely ignore the visual aspect of the experience. Your body is a vehicle for your own experience, not an ornament for someone else's enjoyment. The rule of constant readiness. The rule. You should inherently want to have sex. If you do not feel spontaneous desire, you are broken. You must manufacture readiness to keep the relationship healthy. The reality: we know from the previous chapters that a traumatized nervous system pulls the sap into the roots. Spontaneous desire requires an abundance of surplus energy and an absolute certainty of safety. It is often the very last thing to return after a trauma. The permission to drop it. You have permission to have zero spontaneous desire. You have permission to rely on responsive desire, the kind of desire that only might show up after you have slowly, safely engaged in low-pressure connection. And you have permission to accept that sometimes the desire simply will not show up at all, and that is perfectly okay. The rebellion of dropping the act, taking off this armor, is not a passive process. It is a gritty, witty, and profound act of rebellion. It takes a remarkable amount of defiance to look at a culture that demands performance, to look at a partner who might be expecting the usual routine, and to say, "No more. I am officially retiring from the stage." What does it actually look like to drop the act? It looks like radical, uncomfortable honesty. It means stopping midway through an intimate moment when you realize you have floated up to the ceiling and saying to your partner, "I just realized I am performing right now. I feel completely numb. I need to stop." It means embracing the glorious, necessary awkwardness of real connection. When we take off the polished armor, what is underneath is often messy, unsure, and vulnerable. Real healing is not about replacing the armor of trauma with the armor of a perfectly healed person. Real healing is about allowing yourself to be a clumsy, fumbling human being who is relearning how to walk without the heavy iron suit. Dropping the act means giving yourself the grace to say, "I don't know what I'm doing." It means looking at your partner and admitting, "I don't know what feels good right now. I don't know what I want. I only know that I don't want to fake it anymore." This honesty is the ultimate unbinding. The moment you declare that you will no longer perform, the armor cracks. You are no longer managing an illusion. You are standing in the truth of your winter. And while the winter may be cold, the truth is infinitely lighter than the iron you are carrying. The space between the armor and the skin, when you first begin to take off the armor, you may experience a profound sense of nakedness and vulnerability that triggers your anxiety. This is completely normal. If you have worn a heavy coat for a decade, the moment you take it off, even a warm summer breeze will feel jarring to your skin. Your nervous system is accustomed to the compression of the armor. It is accustomed to the predictable, controlled environment of the scripted performance. Removing that control is inherently frightening to a traumatized brain. Therefore, you must take the armor off slowly. You do not have to strip it all away in one night. You can start by unbuckling the helmet. You can start by simply breaking one of the invisible rules. Perhaps tonight, the only armor you remove is the rule of the goalpost. You agree to simply lie next to your partner with no intention of the night escalating. You feel the unfamiliar lightness of not having to manage an outcome. As you gently remove these layers, piece by piece, you are making space. You are creating a gap between the heavy, restrictive expectations of the world and the soft, breathing reality of your own skin. In that gap, your ecosystem can finally begin to take a deep, unhindered breath. You are no longer an actor in a play you did not write. You are the author of your own physical reality. You are stepping out of the courtroom, walking off the stage, and quietly returning to the forest, exactly as you are. A gentle grounding practice. Shedding the layers when we talk about dropping the armor and releasing the invisible rules, it can feel like a very large, abstract psychological concept. To make this unbinding real for your nervous system, we need to translate it into a physical, somatic experience. This practice uses the act of physically shedding layers to help your brain visualize and somaticize the release of expectation. It is a profoundly gentle way to practice taking off the costume of performance. The practice, the physical unbinding, prepare your layers. For this practice, you will need to intentionally dress in a few layers of comfortable clothing. This could be a light t-shirt, a heavier sweater over that, and perhaps a blanket draped over your shoulders. You might even put on a pair of comfortable socks or a scarf. Find a secure environment. Stand or sit in a room where you have complete privacy. Close the door. Ensure the temperature is comfortable. Acknowledge the weight. Take a moment to feel the physical weight and slight restriction of the layers you are wearing. Notice how the sweater sits on your shoulders or how the blanket pulls slightly. As you feel this physical weight, bring to mind one of the invisible rules you often carry into intimacy, e.g., the need to look perfect, the pressure to climax, the guilt of not being ready. The first removal. Take a slow, deliberate breath. As you exhale, physically remove the outermost layer, the blanket or the scarf. Let it fall completely to the floor. Do not fold it or put it away neatly, just let it drop. As it falls, say aloud to yourself, I do not have to carry the weight of the invisible rule. I give myself permission to drop it. Notice the shift. Close your eyes for a moment. Notice the subtle change in temperature on your skin. Notice the slight increase in your physical freedom of movement. Do not rush to the next step. Just feel the absence of that top layer. The second removal. Take another slow, grounding breath. As you exhale, take off the next layer, the heavy sweater. Again, let it fall to the floor. Say aloud, I am taking off the performance. I do not have to act for anyone today. I am allowed to be exactly as I am. The bare ecosystem. Stand or sit in your remaining lightest layer of clothing. Notice how much easier it is to lift your arms, to expand your chest, and to breathe. Look at the heavy clothes on the floor. They protected you, they kept you warm, but you do not need them inside this safe room. The closing affirmation. Place one hand flat over your own heart and one hand on your belly. Feel the rise and fall of your own breath. Silently affirm to yourself, my body is not a stage. My body is a breathing ecosystem. I am safe here without the armor. You can return to this practice whenever you feel the heavy expectations of the world or of your partner beginning to suffocate your boundaries. The armor is a choice, not a permanent fixture. You have the grit, the wisdom, and the absolute authority to unbuckle it and let your ecosystem breathe. Chapter 5. A wide, quiet sky of desire when you finally unbuckle the heavy, restrictive armor of societal expectation and allow it to crash to the floor. The immediate sensation is often relief. The crushing weight of having to perform, of having to manage an outcome, and of having to pretend you are not in the middle of a protective winter is finally gone. You have granted yourself the ultimate permission, the permission to simply be a numb, resting ecosystem. But as the days or weeks pass in this new armorless state, you might find a different kind of anxiety creeping in. It is the anxiety of the void. You look out at your internal landscape, and where there used to be a bustling, demanding, albeit exhausting, script for intimacy, there is now just quiet. If you are not performing the traditional, highly scripted act of sex, what are you doing? If climax and penetration are explicitly off the table, what is left? If the central fire of your physical desire has been extinguished by the cold waters of trauma, what happens to the rest of the forest? These questions arise because we have been taught a terrifyingly narrow definition of what it means to be a physical, sensual being. We have been conditioned to look at the vast, infinitely complex human experience of connection and reduce it to a single, tiny point. We have placed all our focus on a microscopic pinhead of experience, the mechanical act of traditional sex. But when trauma takes that pinhead away from you, you do not lose your capacity for physical connection. You simply lose your tunnel vision. When you look up from the missing pinhead, you will realize there is an entire, wide, quiet sky of desire waiting for you. This chapter is your invitation to look up. We are going to explore how to become a sensual creature again, entirely outside the bounds of sexual expectation. We are going to learn how to engage the ecosystem without ever demanding that it bloom. The tyranny of the narrow scope to understand the wide sky, we must first examine how our vision became so restricted. In our culture, intimacy is viewed as a staircase. At the bottom of the stairs, you have a brief glance or a smile. The next step is a touch on the arm, then a kiss, then heavy petting, and finally at the top of the stairs, the ultimate destination, intercourse and orgasm. We are taught that the only reason to step onto the bottom stair is to climb to the top. If you stop halfway up, you have failed. If you never intend to climb to the top, society implies you shouldn't even bother walking into the stairwell. For a traumatized nervous system, this staircase is a terrifying structure. If you are struggling with sexual impotence, you look at the top of the stairs and your body physically recoils. Because you know you cannot reach the top, or because reaching the top is deeply associated with pain, violation, or fear, you refuse to even place a foot on the first step. You stop holding hands. You stop lingering in a hug. You pull away from a gentle kiss. You abandon all forms of physical touch because you have been taught that every touch is a contract promising an escalation you cannot deliver. This is the tyranny of the narrow scope. It steals the everyday, grounding comforts of human connection by turning them into threatening precursors to sex. It tells you that if you cannot be a sexual being, you must become an entirely isolated, touchless island. The soft unbinding requires us to completely demolish the staircase. We must dismantle the idea that touch is a sequential process. We are replacing the staircase with an open, sprawling meadow. In a meadow, you can walk in any direction. You can wander over to a patch of sun and sit there. You can touch a blade of grass and then simply let it go. There is no destination. There is no escalation. A touch can just be a touch, complete, whole, and perfectly sufficient exactly as it is. Decoupling the sensual from the sexual to explore the wide sky, we must make a crucial distinction between sexuality and sensuality. These two words are often used interchangeably, but for our purposes, they are fundamentally different. Sexuality involves the biological and psychological drives related to reproduction, erotic arousal, and the specific functioning of the sexual organs. When your body is in a trauma-induced winter, your sexuality is the part of the ecosystem that has pulled its sap deep into the roots. It is offline, and it needs to stay offline until the environment is safe. Sensuality, on the other hand, is much broader. The word comes from the Latin sensus, meaning feeling or perception. Sensuality is simply the act of engaging your physical senses, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. It is the ability to perceive your environment through your physical form. Trauma does not just shut down our sexuality, it often blunts our sensuality, too. The freeze response makes us numb to the world. We stop noticing the taste of our food. We stop feeling the temperature of the air on our skin. We dissociate from our physical form entirely, becoming floating heads disconnected from the neck down. Healing your ecosystem does not begin with forcing your sexuality back online. It begins with gently, quietly waking up your sensuality. It is about proving to your nervous system that it is safe to feel things again, provided those things are entirely divorced from sexual demands. You are a deeply sensual creature, even if your hands are empty of sexual desire. Your body still has millions of nerve endings that are capable of receiving safe, comforting data from the world. We are going to start feeding your ecosystem that safe data. Navigating the sensory landscape. The 5 gates. If the body is an ecosystem, the 5 senses are the gates through which we interact with the environment. When the main gate, sexuality, is locked tight, we do not batter it down. We gently open the side gates. 1. The gate of touch. Seeking the neutral zones. When we think of touch in the context of intimacy, we usually think of charged zones, the lips, the chest, the inner thighs, the pelvis. For a body holding trauma, these zones are heavily fortified. Touching them, even with benign intentions, triggers the alarm system. To re-engage sensuality, we must seek out the neutral zones. These are areas of the body that are rarely associated with sexual expectation, and therefore, the nervous system does not guard them as fiercely. The forearms, the shins, the back of the hands, the scalp, the shoulder blades. What if intimacy with a partner, or intimacy with yourself, looked like spending 20 minutes just tracing the veins on the back of your hand? What if it looked like feeling the firm, grounding pressure of someone rubbing your feet after a long day, with the explicit agreement that the touch will never travel higher than the ankle? This is safe, sensual nourishment. It allows the nervous system to experience physical connection without the panic of escalation. 2. The gate of temperature and weight. Sometimes, the trauma is so severe that any skin-to-skin contact, even in neutral zones, is too much. That is perfectly okay. We can bypass human touch entirely and focus on the elements. Weight is a profound communicator of safety to the nervous system. The deep, even pressure of a weighted blanket signals to the brain that you are contained and secure. Temperature, too, can be deeply soothing. The enveloping heat of a bath, the sharp, waking chill of an ice pack placed on the back of the neck during a moment of panic, or the warmth of a mug of tea held in both hands. These are intensely physical, deeply sensual experiences. They are ways of experiencing your body that require absolutely no performance. 3. The gate of sound. The resonance of safety. We often forget how profoundly sound impacts our physical state. Trauma survivors are frequently hypervigilant to sound, startling at slamming doors or loud voices. But sound can also be an erotic, grounding force. The deep, rumbling purr of a pet. The rhythmic, repetitive sound of rain hitting a window pane. The gritty, complex vibrations of a piece of music you love. You can experience a profound, physical release by simply lying on the floor, closing your eyes, and letting a piece of music wash over your body. You are allowing the environment to touch you through sound waves. It is a form of passive, safe receptivity, a critical skill for an ecosystem learning to thaw. 4. The gate of sight, the intimacy of witnessing when you are trapped in the performance of sex. You are constantly managing how you look. You are the object being viewed. True sensual sight is about becoming the observer. It is the quiet intimacy of watching a candle flicker. It is the safety of looking at your partner from across the room, watching them read a book, and feeling a warm, non-sexual affection for them. If eye contact is too intense, as it often is for trauma survivors, you can practice parallel looking, sitting side by side with someone and looking at the exact same thing, like a television screen or a sunset. You are sharing an experience, building a tether without the pressure of direct visual engagement. 5. The gate of taste and smell. The anchors of the present smell is intimately tied to memory. It can trigger profound flashbacks, but it can also serve as a powerful anchor to the present moment. Choosing a specific, grounding scent, like cedar, peppermint, or a specific lotion, and using it only when you feel safe can create a new neural pathway. Taste, too, forces the mind into the present. Eating a piece of dark chocolate slowly, focusing entirely on the bitterness, the sweetness, and the melting texture, is an exercise in profound bodily presence. The erotic as a life force. As you begin to explore this wide sky, as you begin to slowly open these side gates, you might notice a subtle shift in your energy. You might notice a day where the sun hits your skin and for just a fraction of a second, you feel a spark of genuine pleasure. You might hear a song and feel a sudden, fierce urge to move your body. You might confuse this spark with sexual desire. You might think, "Oh, my sexuality is back. The winter is over." And rush to act on it, only to find the door slam shut again. I want to introduce you to a concept articulated beautifully by the poet and philosopher Otter Lord, though we will adapt it here for our gentle ecosystem. Lord spoke of the erotic, not as the act of sex, but as a deep, internal life force. It is the capacity for joy, the capacity to feel deeply, and the profound, vibrating energy of being alive. When your ecosystem begins to thaw, what you are feeling is not necessarily the return of your sexuality. You're feeling the return of your erotic life force. This force is not a demand for sex. It is simply the sap beginning to run in the trees again. It is the raw energy of your resilience. You can channel this gritty, beautiful energy into anything. You can channel it into writing, into painting, into cooking a complex meal, into riding a horse, or into advocating for yourself and others. You do not have to capture this energy and force it into the bedroom. In fact, doing so prematurely will almost certainly trigger another freeze. When you feel a spark of joy or a sudden, sharp clarity of presence, just let it be exactly what it is. Let the energy spread through the branches of your forest without demanding it produce a specific fruit. Enjoy the feeling of being alive. That is enough. Redefining intimacy with a partner if you have a partner. Exploring this wide sky of desire will require you to rewrite the rules of your shared life. When you take the sexual staircase away, couples often feel a terrifying lack of structure. If we are not escalating toward sex, how do we show each other love? How do we maintain physical intimacy when one partner's hands are empty? The answer lies in cultivating what psychologists call parallel play, a concept usually applied to children, but deeply vital for adults healing from trauma. Parallel play is when two people engage in separate activities in the same space, simply enjoying the presence of the other without demanding interaction. It is sitting on opposite ends of the couch, reading different books, with only your feet touching. It is one person cooking dinner while the other sits at the kitchen island, quietly keeping them company. It is lying in bed, back to back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of the other person's breathing, knowing with absolute certainty that they will not turn around and initiate touch. This is not a lesser form of intimacy. It is, in many ways, a far more profound, mature form of connection than the frantic, scripted performance of sex. It is the intimacy of absolute safety. It is the intimacy of being witnessed in your rest. You are teaching your partner how to love your ecosystem when it is not producing. And your partner is teaching your nervous system that their love is not conditional upon your biological responses. This mutual patience, this shared quiet in the winter forest, is the fertile soil out of which genuine, authentic connection will eventually, slowly grow. Expanding the landscape of your worth, the ultimate goal of exploring this wide sky, is to uncouple your inherent worth from your sexual function. When your definition of intimacy is a tiny pinhead, your failure to achieve that pinhead feels like a total, catastrophic failure of self. You view yourself as broken, useless, and unlovable. But when you realize that intimacy is a vast sky, that it includes the way you hold a warm mug, the way you listen to music, the way you sit quietly with a partner, and the way you honor the boundaries of your own numb body, you realize that you are not failing at all. You are actually succeeding at a remarkably high level of self-care. You are doing the incredibly difficult, gritty work of honoring your limits. You are refusing to perform. You are refusing to betray your nervous system just to make someone else comfortable. You are a vast, complex landscape. The winter in one part of your forest does not negate the beauty of the entire ecosystem. Your hands may be empty of sexual desire, but they are full of courage, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to your own healing. A gentle grounding practice. The texture tour to help you gently step away from the narrow scope of sexual performance and begin exploring the safe, neutral zones of your sensory landscape. We are going to practice a structured, low-stakes somatic exercise. This practice is designed to wake up the sensory receptors in your skin without triggering the alarm bells of your nervous system. It is purely about gathering data, not generating arousal. The practice. The texture tour. Gather your tools. Before you begin, find 3 objects in your home with distinctly different textures. They should not be objects associated with intimacy. For example, you might choose a smooth metal spoon, a soft feather or makeup brush, and a piece of rough fabric like a towel or denim. Establish your base. Sit comfortably in a safe, quiet space. Take a slow breath, reminding yourself that there is no goal here, no destination, and no right or wrong way to feel. Select the neutral zone. Choose an area of your body that feels completely emotionally neutral. The forearm from the elbow down to the wrist is usually an excellent choice. Rest this arm comfortably on your lap or a table. The first texture. Take the first object, e.g. the smooth spoon. Close your eyes if you feel safe doing so. Slowly, deliberately drag the back of the spoon down your forearm. Do this 3 times. Notice the temperature. Is it cool? Notice the pressure. Does it glide easily? Do not judge the sensation as good or bad. Simply name what it is. The pause. Put the first object down. Wait for 10 seconds. Allow your nervous system to register that the touch started, happened, and safely stopped. The second texture. Take the second object, e.g. the soft brush. Drag it slowly down the same path on your forearm. Notice the profound difference in the data your skin is sending to your brain. Notice how light it feels, how it might tickle the fine hairs on your arm. The pause. Put the object down, take a breath. The third texture. Take the final object, e.g. the rough fabric. Press it gently against your skin and drag it downward. Notice the friction. Notice the density of the material, the integration. Put all the objects aside. Rest your other hand gently over the forearm you just explored. Just hold it there for a moment. Silently say to yourself, I am capable of feeling. My skin can receive safe data. I am a living ecosystem. By taking this slow, deliberate texture tour, you are proving to your body that touch does not always mean escalation. You are reminding your nervous system that the world is full of safe, benign sensations waiting to be felt. You are stepping out of the narrow stairwell and walking freely out into the wide, quiet sky. Chapter 6. Unshaming the body. There is a shadow that often creeps into the quiet, frozen forest of a traumatized nervous system. It does not announce itself loudly. It seeps into the soil, quietly poisoning the roots, convincing the ecosystem that the winter it is enduring is not a natural season of rest, but a permanent state of rot. This shadow is shame. In our earlier chapters, we touched briefly on the heavy companions of grief, noting how guilt and anger often accompany the loss of our sexual vitality. But shame requires an entire chapter of its own. Because while guilt tells you that you have done something wrong, shame leans in close and whispers a far more devastating lie. It tells you that you are something wrong. When you're carrying the weight of empty hands, unable to summon the physical desire or function you wish you had, shame is the voice that says, you are broken. You are defective. You are less of a woman, less of a man, less of a partner, less of a human being. If we are to achieve true healing beyond judgment, we must confront this shadow directly. We must pull it out of the dark, expose it to the light of profound empathy, and systematically dismantle the lies it tells us about our worth. The soft unbinding is not just about releasing the behavioral scripts of how we perform intimacy. It is about unbinding our very identity from our biological function. The parasite in the ecosystem. To understand how to unbind from shame, we must first understand how it operates within your inner landscape. In a healthy ecosystem, everything has inherent value simply because it exists. The moss does not need to justify its existence to the towering oak tree. The dormant seed in the winter soil is not considered worthless simply because it is not currently flowering. Nature does not assign moral value to biological states, but human beings, heavily conditioned by society, have introduced a parasite into our internal ecosystems, the concept of the transactional body. From a very young age, we are taught that our bodies are currency. We are taught that the value of our physical form lies in what it can produce, how it performs, and how much pleasure it can generate for ourselves or for others. We absorb the message that a good body is a functional, highly responsive, aesthetically pleasing machine. Therefore, when trauma forces the nervous system to shut down that function, when the body initiates a protective freeze and says no to sexual engagement, we automatically conclude that the body has lost its value. Shame thrives on this transactional logic. It convinces you that if your body is not producing sexual desire or traditional intimacy, your overall worth as a person has plummeted. It ties your human dignity directly to the blood flow in your pelvis and the responsiveness of your nerve endings. When you say it out loud, the absurdity of this logic becomes apparent. Would you ever look at a friend who has broken their leg and tell them their inherent worth as a human being has diminished because they cannot run a marathon? Of course not. You would recognize that their body is injured, that it needs time to heal, and that their value remains entirely intact. Yet, when the injury is invisible, when the trauma is held in the nervous system and manifests as sexual impotence or numbness, we apply a brutally unforgiving standard to ourselves. We become our own harshest critics, standing in the middle of our frozen forest, demanding that the soil produce fruit and hatting it when it cannot. The myth of the betrayal, one of the most persistent, agonizing narratives that fuels body shame after trauma, is the profound sense of betrayal. Survivors often express a deep, gritty resentment toward their own physical forms. You might look at your body and think, why didn't you fight back? Why did you freeze? And why, now that we are safe, won't you just work the way you are supposed to? Why are you punishing me? When we hold on to this narrative, the body becomes an enemy. It becomes a traitor that locked the doors and threw away the key, trapping us in a state of numb isolation. But this narrative is entirely backward. We must completely rewrite the story of what your body did and what it is currently doing. Your body did not betray you. Your body saved you. When you were faced with an overwhelming threat, your conscious mind might have wanted to fight or run, but your autonomic nervous system calculated the odds and realized that fighting or fleeing would result in greater harm. So, it deployed its ultimate defense mechanism, the freeze. It numbed you to the physical pain. It disconnected you from the present horror. It absorbed the shockwave of the trauma so that your core consciousness could survive. And now, in the aftermath, your body is still trying to save you. The impotence, the lack of arousal, the sudden panic when intimacy is initiated, these are not acts of rebellion. They are acts of profound, misguided devotion. Your nervous system is standing guard, heavily armed, refusing to let down the drawbridge because it is terrified that the invaders will return. Your body is not a traitor. It is an exhausted, battle-weary protector that does not yet realize the war is over. When you can shift your perspective from betrayal to gratitude, when you can look at your numb hands and say, "Thank you for keeping me alive, even though I don't need this shield anymore," the shame begins to lose its grip. You cannot simultaneously hate and be grateful for the same thing. Gratitude introduces a soft, warm light into the ecosystem, and shame cannot survive in the light. The trap of toxic positivity, the pivot to neutrality. When people realize they are carrying immense body shame, their first instinct is often to try and swing the pendulum entirely in the opposite direction. They try to embrace body positivity. They stand in front of the mirror and try to force themselves to say, "I love my body. My body is beautiful and perfect." If you are healing from sexual trauma and impotence, This forced positivity can actually be incredibly harmful. It is just another form of performance. When your body feels like an alien, numb, or painful place to inhabit, trying to force yourself to love, it is a violent emotional demand. Your brain knows you are lying, and the dissonance between what you are saying and what you are actually feeling creates more anxiety. It feels like you are failing yet another test, the test of being perfectly healed and self-loving. The soft unbinding does not require you to love your body today. It only requires you to drop the hostility. We are not aiming for body positivity. We are aiming for body neutrality. Body neutrality is the profound, gritty acceptance that your body simply is. It is the understanding that your physical form is a vessel, a living ecosystem, and that its primary job is not to be beautiful or sexy or constantly aroused, but simply to carry you through this world. Body neutrality looks at the empty hands and says, "My hands are empty today." That is a fact. It is neither good nor bad. It simply is the current weather. Neutrality removes the moral judgment from your biological state. It allows you to inhabit your body without having to constantly evaluate its performance. You do not have to throw a parade for your frozen forest, but you must stop setting it on fire with your hatred. You are allowed to feel neutral about your numbness. You are allowed to say, "I don't love how my body is functioning right now, but I accept that this is where we are, and I refuse to punish myself for it." Cognitive unbinding. Separating worth from whether to actively dismantle shame, we must practice a psychological technique known as cognitive diffusion. This simply means learning to step back from our thoughts and untangle our core identity from our passing internal experiences. Shame speaks in absolute statements. It says, "I am broken." Notice the structure of that sentence. It ties your entire identity, "I am," to a temporary state, "broken." It fuses the two together so tightly that you cannot tell where the trauma ends and where your soul begins. Cognitive unbinding requires us to change the language we use internally. It requires us to insert a wedge of spaciousness between our identity and our physical state. We must remember that we are the sky, and our physical responses are merely the weather. The sky is not destroyed by a thunderstorm, and it is not diminished by a long, cold winter. When you notice a shame-based thought arising, I want you to practice rewriting the sentence in your mind. Instead of, "I am sexually broken," rewrite as, "My nervous system is currently experiencing a protective freeze." Instead of, "I am a failure as a partner because I cannot be intimate," rewrite as, "I am a loving partner whose body currently requires a pause from physical intimacy." Instead of, "I am numb and worthless," rewrite as, "I am noticing the sensation of numbness in my body, and my worth remains entirely intact." This is not just playing with words. Language dictates reality. By changing the way you describe your experience, you are physically rewiring the neural pathways in your brain. You are taking the gavel away from your inner critic. You are ceasing the self-prosecution and stepping into the role of a compassionate, objective observer. The courage to be clunky, a significant portion of body shame in the bedroom, comes from the fear of looking awkward, unsexy, or clunky. We hold an image in our minds of what seamless, passionate intimacy is supposed to look like, and when our traumatized bodies inevitably stumble, freeze, or require us to stop awkwardly midway through an encounter, the shame is suffocating. We feel humiliated. We apologize profusely. We shrink into ourselves, convinced we have ruined the moment. Unshaming the body requires us to boldly, unapologetically embrace the clunky. Healing is not a graceful, cinematic montage. It is gritty work. It is stopping a kiss to say, "Wait, my chest just got really tight, I need to back up." It is adjusting the pillows 3 times because your nervous system suddenly feels trapped. It is crying unexpectedly because a certain touch reminded your body of something it is trying to forget. If you are going to heal, you must give yourself permission to be entirely ungraceful. You must look at your partner and yourself and establish a new rule. Awkwardness is welcome here. When we remove the demand for perfection, we remove the primary weapon of shame.